Hey there, all you viewers! You know, there are a lot of awesome video game heroes. Sonic the Hedgehog, Mario and Luigi, Doom Guy. Great characters like that who've made their titles great to play. But for every good video game icon, there's bound to be another one that's just a plain-ass joke. So-called heroes like Ninja Bread Man or Sid the Dummy. Basically the freaking losers of the gaming world. The question is, who are the biggest failures? So, strap in everyone, because I'm gonna be counting down the top 10 lamest video game heroes.
Loser! You're a loser!
Number 10. Jim the Knight from Hidelight and Virtual Hidelight. Gotta mention this first. Yes, Hidelight does at first glance look like a Zelda ripoff, but truth be told, Hidelight was released before the first Zelda title. However, and I'm paraquoting ProJared here, while Hidelight might have been the first to the open-world action-adventure genre, Zelda did it much better, especially when it came to making a hero. You can pretty much think of Jim as the trash baby version of Link. Unlike Link, who's quite a bit strong when he starts an adventure, Jim is as weak as a baby's fart. In fact, he's so weak that he'll actually die just by being in a dark, unlit cave or dungeon for too long. So great is Jim's nyctophobia that he practically croaks from fright when he's in complete darkness. This problem was fortunately rectified in Virtual Hidelight, but that game is arguably worse than the original. Another shitty thing about Jim is his magic spells. None of them are really useful, and using them on enemies is typically ineffective. He's almost always better off using his regular sword attack, which, to be fair, does get stronger the more you level him up. You could kind of think of Jim the Knight as a bargain bin stock D&D PC. He's a boring character, and there's nothing particularly interesting about him. But that's why he's only at number 10. Jim's worst crime is that he's very, very dull. These next quote-unquote heroes are much lousier, such as...
Loser! You're a loser!
Number 9. Matt Hazard from Eat Lead. Okay, I get what they were trying to do with this character. He's a satire of strongman heroes like Duke Nukem or Agent 47. This all would have been fine had Eat Lead have been fun, or if Hazard himself hadn't have been handled like some 10-year-old's fanfiction OC. I'm honestly not trying to be that funny with that whole fanfiction OC bit. Eat Lead's plot and characters, including Matt, seem like they were all written by a kid. Also, there's the gameplay of Hazard's title. Think of a really fucking boring version of one of the Uncharted games. No blood, monotonous pacing, and the weapons are not fun to use. It's a completely watered-down experience. Another stupid thing Matt does is all the fourth wall jokes he makes. Yeah, Eat Lead is a bit self-aware. I don't have a problem with fourth wall jokes as long as they're done right. For instance, whenever a hero like, say, Gex the Gecko breaks the fourth wall, it's endearing. When Matt Hazard does it, it just comes off hella dumb. I bet I could come up with a better main character while drunk and high. Hazard, you suck, and your game sucks.
Well, I'm betting I can kick your upgraded ass.
Try me.
Loser! You're a loser!
Number 8. Ark Thompson from Resident Evil Survivor. The Resident Evil franchise has a lot of memorable heroes. Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Rebecca Chambers, and those are just to name a few. But I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the dude who drew the short straw. Enter Ark Thompson, the lamest main character from the lamest RE title. Firstly, he starts his adventure out with amnesia. 'Cause that's not cliché at all. During his bout of memory loss, Ark becomes a complete imbecile who practically believes anything that's said to him, even if it's from an obviously shady homeless person or this umbrella guy. That's not even the worst part about this character, though. The worst part is his voice. Take a listen.
At the request of my friend, Leon S. Kennedy, I came here to investigate. Oh, yes! I remember!
He sounds like a socially inept dweeb. Granted, what Art just said there begs the question. How are he and Leon Kennedy friends? And also, why would Leon ever be caught hanging around such a flunky? Never explained. In fact, I used to question whether or not Resident Evil Survivor, and thus Art Thompson, is even canon. I did my research, and it turns out, yeah, both the game and its main character are part of the RE timeline. That, in and of itself, makes me wonder what the hell was going on at Capcom when they were making this game. Maybe they were smoking opium or something.
Loser! You're a loser!
Number 7. Drake, from Drake of the 99 Dragons. The Matrix movies were a big deal back in the early 2000s decade. You almost couldn't watch any TV channel or go into any department store without seeing something related to those three films, and especially their main character, Neo. This is where Majesco got the bright idea to create their game and hero, Drake. Drake is supposed to be this renowned assassin, but he dies more times than Krillin did in the entirety of the DBZ franchise. And I don't mean dying while you're playing, which he does a lot of that too. I mean dying in the cutscenes. Drake is first killed by a ghost, then he jumps out a window, and he even gets shot in the back. There are also numerous other times he bites the dust within the game's plot. Besides being a dickhead of an assassin, Drake is also very awkward. For example, whenever he talks, his mouth never closes. It's just constantly open, like he was born with some kind of deformity. He also has gray skin and white piercing eyes, which is weird because nobody else in the game is like that. Drake looks like some middle-aged guy crappily cosplaying as both a Dark Elf from the Elder Scrolls series and Neo from The Matrix. This character blows. Majesco should have spent more time crafting their hero and title rather than binge-watching early 2000s action flicks in the vain hopes of emulating what they saw. One last thing I should mention though, the creators of Drake of the 99 Dragons really thought this was going to take off. A comic book and cartoon based off the game were being pitched, but thankfully neither of those went anywhere. Probably because the title was met with critical and commercial revulsion upon its release.
Loser! You're a loser!
Number 6. The Cheetah Men from the Action 52 series. Technically, these are 3 heroes, but I decided to roll them into one slot because, unlike all the others on this list, the Cheetah Men actually had potential. Now, hear me out. Action 52 was released on the NES in 1991, and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were a huge thing back then. Also, Battletoads was released the same year, and on the same console, so the Cheetah Men could have become something awesome. Unfortunately, Vince Perry, the mastermind behind Action 52, concentrated only about a quarter of his efforts on them. The Cheetah Men were only in one of the 52 games packed into Action 52. It didn't matter anyway because every title, including the Cheetah Men, was a glitch-ridden nightmare. Due to the game's ridiculously high price, which was $200 by the way, and shitty quality, Action 52 was a giant flop. This didn't stop Vince Perry from funding a sequel entitled Cheetah Men 2, but that game never got an official release and it was just as bad as the original. Now, after creating 2 failures, you would think Mr. Perry would call it quits, right? Well, no, he didn't. A few years later, another Action 52, and thus another Cheetah Men game, arrived on the Genesis. It was the worst of them all. Hell, I can't even get past the first stage. It's kinda tragic. The Cheetah Men, as their own IP, could have become a real hit. Too bad Vince Perry had delusions of grandeur.
Loser! You're a loser!
Number 5. Kid Clown from Kid Clown and Crazy Chase. I have no fucking clue why Kemco, famous for the Top Gear racing series, would ever think that a friggin' clown could be passed off as a platformer mascot. And that's exactly what Kid Clown is. He's a forgotten platform icon from the 90s. But unlike, say, Sparkster or Jazz the Jackrabbit, Kid Clown should have stayed forgotten. His title's gameplay is pretty bad considering how it's a platformer on rails. Kid Clown makes everything worse, though, by just being him. Ask yourselves, Would you entrust the fate of an entire planet to some court jester? I sure as shit wouldn't. The reason why is because a clown is liable to trip over himself, get stuck, burned, and crushed by anything and everything in his path. Look, I know it sounds like it, but I don't really hate clowns. I don't think Bozo or Pennywise or even Ronald McDonald are particularly scary or annoying. In fact, my favorite comic book supervillain of all time is a clown. And believe it or not, clowns can make good protagonists in a game, just as long as they're a homicidal maniac a la Sweet Tooth from Twisted Metal. I should note that there are other bad things with Kid Klown's gameplay, such as having to collect 4 certain objects before the end of each stage. If you miss one, you have to start all over again. Then there's the bomb in each level, which acts as the game's timer, and if you can't reach the end till the bomb explodes, it's back to square fucking one. All this while avoiding a shit ton of hazards and having only 1 life and very few continues. It was as if the title and hero were developed by an actual troupe of clowns. Garbage freaking game and character.
Loser! You're a loser!
Number 4. Bubsy Bobcat from the Bubsy series. Oh goody! Another failed platformer mascot from the 90s. Only Bubsy is higher up the list and thus worse than Kid Klown by default. At least Kid Klown had the decency to be a mostly silent protagonist. Bubsy, on the other hand, never shuts the fuck up. I'll give you viewers a brief example.
Hey, I thought I saw Elvis back there. Keep it up, just keep it up! My contract does not mention paint. Is there a doctor in the house?
Yet that's not even this character's worst trait. He has the durability of tissue paper, meaning that virtually anything can kill him. Bubsy's a complete weak suck who's incapable of taking a punch. Compare that to Mario or Sonic, where they can both take a good beating, provided of course that one has a mushroom and the other has a ring. Bubsy only has these yarn balls, which only give you points. In other words, they don't do diddly dick. One other retarded thing about this character is that if he falls in water, you lose a life. Okay, I may not be an expert on wildlife, but I know for a fact that bobcats can frickin' swim. This all would have been bad enough if Bubsy had only been in 1 game. Nonetheless, he ended up starring in 5 subsequent sequels. 6 if you count that web browser title. According to the information I was able to gather, Michael Berlin, the genius behind this cat's inception, spent 14 hours a day for 7 days playing the original Sonic the Hedgehog. He did this for inspirational reasons. That would have been fine had Berlin realized what made that game so good. It bewilders me how such a jackass of an icon has been in so many titles. Sure, Bubsy's current gen games aren't as bad as his first 4, but they are hella mediocre. I suppose it's because he has a bit of a cult following. There are quite a few people who consider the Bubsy titles so bad that they're good. Just look up any of his games on YouTube and you're sure to find a few thousand reviews and or Let's Plays. Well, Bubsy, you might be a mouthy, frail, and otherwise lame hero, but I will admit, you at least got heart.
Do you believe in miracles?
Loser! You're a loser!
Number 3. Lester from Lester the Unlikely. Yet another 90s platformer icon? Not entirely. The gameplay itself is a lot like Prince of Persia or Flashback, but think of a shitty version of those titles. Laggy and confusing controls, bad weapons, bad plot, and worst of all, a super lame protagonist. Have you viewers ever watched Family Guy? Remember the character Mort Goldman? Yeah, picture him, but about 10 times more geeky and weak. Lester is a freaking sawn-off jello-breath twerp. He makes freaking Urkel look like Sylvester Stallone by comparison. Probably because Lester is less of a hero and more along the lines of a stereotype, followed by the definition of said stereotype. Awkward posture and walk cycle? Check. Thick eyeglasses? Check. High-pitched voice? Check. Fear of virtually everything and anything around him? Double check. Hell, Lester is such a miserable bastard, he actually starts his adventure out by falling asleep on a crate that's then loaded onto a cargo boat, and then the boat is attacked and sunk by pirates, to which Lester somehow survives and ends up on an uncharted island. Eventually he becomes a little braver, but by the time you reach that point in the game, you don't give a damn. Lester has shown his true colors of being a spineless pushover. The guy will run in terror at the sight of a crab or turtle and cowers before the very presence of totem poles. There is an explanation, though, to why Lester and his title are so terrible. According to the game's lead programmer Brian Greenstone, nobody on the dev team really wanted to work on Lester. Perhaps because many of them were already working on another better title called Claymates. Pfft, Lester the Unlikely? More like Lester the Unlikable.
Loser! You're a loser!
Number 2.
Sorry for yourself? Well, you...
Jake Seaver from Fugitive Hunter. Oh boy, the main character from the worst game I've ever played. What I could say about Fugitive Hunter would be enough to fill an entire video all its own. The gameplay is friggin' abysmal, but the protagonist is just as equally bad. Earlier I said Matt Hazard was sorta kind of a ripoff of Duke Nukem. Well, he at least had the excuse of being made that way on purpose. Jake comes off as the unintentional, illegitimate love child of Duke Nukem and Serious Sam. Mind you, viewers, this was the guy who's been assigned the job of tracking down and arresting 10 terrorists, including Osama bin Laden. No joke! I should note that this title predates Operation Neptune Spear, so it was by all accounts appropriate. One of the dumbest things in this game, though, is every time Jake tries to catch a fugitive, he doesn't shoot and immediately subdue them. That would have actually made sense. Instead, Jake goes all Rocky Balboa on their asses. Seriously, every terrorist he arrests, he first has to get into a boxing match with. It's freaking stupid. But that's not exactly the most unfavorable thing about Jake. The worst thing about him is that he's mega one-dimensional. There's positively nothing interesting about this dude. He doesn't have a backstory, it's never explained why he's hunting and capturing terrorists. Nothing! Jake is basically faceless Call of Battle honor soldier number 618. Actually, I take that back because that's an insult to the real duty caller FPS heroes. Yeah, Jake's below them. He's the kind of person who goes to a concert, doesn't mosh, doesn't have a beer, and just sits by himself with a blank, emotionless expression on his face. Now, to be a little fair, Jake does spout off the occasional one-liner, but they all suck in every way conceivable. I almost feel like the devs wanted to make their protagonist more intriguing, but then at the last minute decided to make him as generic as humanly possible. What a sad and sorry excuse of a hero.
Loser! You're a loser!
Dishonorable mentions. Before we get to number 1, I'd like to acknowledge the few icons that were pretty bad, but weren't terrible enough to make the cut. So, here they are. Number 1 is Big the Cat from the Sonic series. There's a reason this wannabe Garfield dumbass is not featured so much in Sonic games anymore. For one thing, in one of the few titles where he was actually playable, his whole gameplay revolved around fishing. The other characters in Sonic Adventure were all fast, and their gameplay was fast-paced. Maybe not as much so as Sonic, but faster than Big. He did get slightly better in Sonic Heroes, so at least Sega addressed the issue. Number 2 is Oscar from the game Oscar. What kind of animal is this character supposed to be, anyway? A badger? A porcupine? A koala? I don't know. I legit tried looking up info on Oscar, and all I found was a very brief Wikipedia article. His title's gameplay is pretty awful too, but unlike Bubsy's, it's much less awful. In short, Flare Software decided they too wanted to ride the mascot craze train during the 90s, but fortunately knew well enough when to quit. Number 3 is Awesome Possum from Awesome Possum Kicks Dr. Machino's Butt. One sentence. A Sonic the Hedgehog ripoff with preachy and obnoxious environmentalism shoved down your throat. Oh, and the gameplay is anus sauce. Well, That's the runner-ups out of the way, so let us now proceed to...
Loser! You're a loser!
Number 1.
Sorry for yourself? Well, you...
Prince Duncan from Dark Castle. Jake Seaver may have come from the worst game I've ever played, but Duncan was the hero of the worst game I've ever played on my favorite console. There are so many things wrong with Dark Castle's gameplay that I don't even know where to begin. The graphics are all washed out and look ugly, the controls are by far the worst I've ever had to deal with, and then there's the protagonist, Duncan, the rancid cherry on this proverbial vomit sundae. What I'd like to know is, who on the dev team thought it would be a good idea to invent what is basically the 99-cent store North Korean sweatshop version of one of the Belmonts from Castlevania? Duncan is so fucking lame, he'll literally trip and fall over a 10-centimeter step. Other shitty aspects of this character include getting dazed and leaving himself open for an attack, carrying rocks as his only means of defense, a pitiful jump, an annoying voice, dying by falling from too high, and dying in one hit. That's right, just like Bubsy. But unlike him, Duncan doesn't have a power-up that gives him momentary invincibility. Another failed icon that Duncan's kind of like is Lester. Again though, Lester actually got brave. And that's the second most fucked up thing about Duncan. He's a downright, clear-cut, absolute, unequivocal wimp. All the other icon flops I've mentioned in this video at the very least had courage on their side. Duncan, on the other hand, is a freaking chicken shit. An overflowing dumpster of a video game hero. When I played Dark Castle, I felt like I was controlling a reject farmer NPC from a JRPG. Seriously, Duncan seems like he'd be right at home in Dragon Quest tending to a garden. He'd give you a quest and then reward you with food or something. One last thing I'd like to say is incompetence is not a virtue, and yet that's this loser's most defining feature. Duncan is the kind of moron who I wouldn't even trust to chase flies off a dead dog's dick, because even that, I think, would be too much for him. This character is completely unfit for doing anything, let alone trying to fight an evil sorcerer. Congratulations, dipshit, you've earned the crown of fail. May your game never be played, and may you forever live in total obscurity. Hey everyone, I hope all of you watchers enjoyed this little tour through Lamest Town. If you did, then leave a like and a comment. I always read them, and I always answer them. If you want to see future videos from either me or my friends Dylan and Mike, then smash that subscribe and bell icons. Alrighty viewers, take care.